Hello, good morning. Hopefully we've got a few of you over here. Just going to see if this is connecting up now. Apologies for the slight delay to the start. Just check this. If anyone would like to say hello in the comments, just check we're all connected and working properly. And of course, if you have any questions about Ruby software that we're obviously going to be covering today, and also, maybe if you could put a bit of information as whether you're coming at this as a beginner or whether you have experience, then that would be great. That's good. I can see a few messages coming through. Thank you. Hello. Perfect. So yeah, it'd be a great way to start this. Today's kind of an interactive session on Ruby. So I'm going to cover all of, I guess, the main basics of the laser software itself. But it'd also be great if you have any particular applications or project ideas, anything like this that you would like to have covered, or we can have a look at. If I don't know the answer, then I'll of course do a follow-up, and we can obviously contact you and give you some more detailed information. But really, it's just to make people who either have no experience of the software at all be more comfortable using it. But also then, like I say, if you have any more specific questions about the software, then of course I can dive into that. And also, what's also useful to know from my side as well is a little bit about maybe even the kind of software that you're using. So maybe you're using Adobe Illustrator, CorelDRAW. Are you actually looking to draw within the Ruby laser software itself? And then obviously I can make sure that we're covering the workflows for obviously all of these different paths to working with the laser. So let's just do a quick switch on here. So today we are going to be working with a Speedy 400 laser, but all of our laser systems are now compatible with our Ruby line of software. So whether you have one of the larger flatbed machines like this, or whether you have something like our smaller Speedy 100, all of them are able to work with the Ruby software. You can also, currently at the moment, you can work between Ruby and the job control software. So first thing is, if you haven't already got Ruby installed, you can of course visit the website, and on there you can find a download link where you can download and install the software. If you have a machine with a touchscreen like this, then it actually has the Ruby software already built into it, and you don't need to install any software at all onto there. But like I say, although we're using this particular machine, it will be compatible with all of those different machines out there. So let's switch across back to here, and let's dive into having a look at an overview of the actual software itself. Okay, so hopefully now you'll be able to see the software side of the Ruby interface. So once you've installed the actual software for the very first time, if you are a new user to using the Ruby, then on the right hand side here you'll see lasers, and then here you will see at the moment we have our current laser that we're going to be using today that has been detected. So if you were new, you'd have a little button here that would say add laser, and this is a serial number, and that would set up the machine. And if you're a job control user, then on your bottom taskbar here you'd have a Ruby icon. You can right click on that icon and you can import your configuration from job control. So that would allow you to quickly take all of your material database settings across to your Ruby installation and have you ready to set up and run the machine. So that's just a little bit on the basic setup there. So now if we come across to the Ruby software itself, the laser process is now split into 4 steps. So we have managing. So this is where we manage all of our designs, our artwork, our jobs. Then from that stage, we would then move across to the next tab, which here is called design, but I think of it more as like a proof. So what we're going to do is we're going to check all of the artwork, make sure it's compatible for the laser. We can detect and see if there's anything wrong with our line colors or any other minor adjustments. So we check our artwork is good. Then we come to the prepare stage. So this is where we now have the ability to see the laser bed itself. we have the live feedback of the laser head itself. So let me just check that this machine is active and ready to go as well. So we'll just get that keyed on and check to see if we can get this to play. So I might need to make an adjustment there. And once you've got that all working, you can then move the actual laser head around and get obviously your job into place. Here we now have our material settings over here. So you can select your material settings, and then finally you have the queue. So this is where we take our job that's all set up, and you can queue jobs into here. And the great thing about having this queue function is it's very easy now to set up multiple jobs at once, get them all ready to go, and then just come and actually start processing the work that you need to do for the day. So hopefully that's given you just that very quick, brief introduction. Hopefully that all makes sense. If there's any questions at all, even throughout or at this stage, then just let me know. I'm just going to get this machine rebooted and restarted. So first thing with any of the laser systems is we go through the homing procedure. So this is where the bed of the machine drops down, and then the actual laser head will start to do its referencing. So I'm just going to take you through initially just some real basic jobs, just so I can hopefully give you some understanding of the basic steps of running one of the machines. So the next thing we have is our material. So you also notice this is kind of like a little bit of I guess housekeeping in terms of material and machine setup. Is I actually have a lot of the bed of the machine all blocked off here with some rubber matting, and here I've also got a bit of additional material. This is purely just to focus the extraction. So a lot of people overlook extraction as part of their laser setup, which then results in additional flaming, more burning, less cleaner cuts. It also makes it more difficult to process thicker material. So just by blocking it off, so the extraction is going to be focused around the area where we want to process, is always a good thing to do. So with the machines, of course, we have to make sure that the actual lens itself is nice and clean. So as we get a little bit of plastic, see what we have here. So most people tend to push the material to the top corner of the bed, and then we move our laser head above the material, and then you obviously set your focus. So for a lot of machines that may be with a manual tool, this machine has the sonar sensor built in, so it's just going to take the measurement of the height. And now the machine is ready to operate. So if we now come back to our laser software, so in our laser software here, now if we go back to the tab here, we can see the live feedback for the laser head position. So again, this would have been available in our previous software as well, but again, obviously it's important to know for doing your quick alignment, especially on your offcuts. Not so useful if you're working with your full sheets of material. And then we get that live positioning. So let's now start to look at the full workflow of getting a job to the machine and processing it for our basic introduction to the software. So on here you have your designs. So we could pick up an already existing design, but let's just bring in something new into this instead. So to add a job, you can either drag and drop, or you can click import here. And if you click import on here, then you're able to then select all of the different file formats that the software can work with. I'm just going to switch back to sharing my entire screen, just because I think you may otherwise be struggling to see the file formats that we can work with. Okay, let's just do that on the entire thing. If you could just confirm as well. Okay, so hopefully you should now be able to see the entire screen for the setup. So on here, when we click on this imports button, we can now see all of the different file formats that we're able to work with the system. So on here we have things like Adobe Illustrator files, we of course have PDFs, and then you have your standard kind of bitmap type files, so your PNGs, JPEGs. We have your SVGs, so your scalable vector graphics, EPS, DXF, and many more. But the thing I'd like to focus on today is really, or not all of these file formats are kind of equal. And by that I mean a lot of these are of course designed, and the standards are all set by the actual manufacturers of a specific file format. So for example, something like an AI or a DXF file is actually evolving over time and changing, whereas something like a PDF is actually has a standard for that actual type of file, and that means the file can be more consistent in terms of its ability to be imported. We also now have the ability to work with embedded fonts within PDF files as well. So if you work with artwork where you're going to have your kind of non-standard fonts, then a PDF is a great way to bring it in if you're not going to vectorize it. So we've got PDFs, your DXFs, which we just need to check the scaling when you bring those on. And another one that's really good is SVGs as well. So I find these are very consistent file formats. It's quite an old type file format, but a lot of software supports it, and you should get a good reference. But you can see that essentially there's a huge range of different files that we can bring straight into our machine. So let's just have a quick look on here. And what we're going to do is let's look at a laser box maker. So this is a really easy way for anyone who's not used this before just to generate some simple templates or some simple ways to just quickly bring in and create some simple shapes that you can easily assemble. Really useful if you need to do jigs and things like that. And in here you can see you just specify things. So I'm just going to do something simple for now. So we'll do a 50mm box outside. You can tell it the material thickness. This obviously allows us to choose the correct width for the tabs. Then we have the different formats. So again, like I mentioned, PDF, SVG, these are all great. And then we can generate this. So you can see here's an example of one of these files. And then we can take this file on here. So let's find this. And then we're going to take the file and we're simply just going to drag and drop it into our queue here. So when I click on the job, it automatically takes me to the next stage, to the actual design tab here. And here you can see we can now start our kind of proofing process for checking the actual file itself and making sure it's all going to work. So typically with our lasers, we tend to use red for cutting, and we tend to use black for the engrave process. And as you can see at the moment, this doesn't match up. So this is where the Ruby software can be really useful, because for example, I can come down to this red artwork. I don't need this. So I'd recommend you, rather than selecting objects here, I try to, if possible, always work on the right hand side over here. So I'm going to take this, we're going to delete out the text. I'm going to take all of the black lines that I actually want to be cut, so then I'd set them to red. And again, these blue layers here, we can set this to be a cut as well. So again, I'm going to select all of these and switch these to red. And now you can see it's all under one layer. You can see we have some excess space here around the actual drawing itself. Now it's up to you whether you want to use this method. This could be useful if you want to make sure that your cut paths are going to fit onto your material. But sometimes you want to use as much of the material as possible, and you can simply click this Fit to Design button. And this little button here will shrink around the job. If, for example, you knew that you wanted to have a 2mm gap to your edges, then you could come under here and we could say type 2. And then you can update this then to have a 2mm border. So that way, if I snap my job now right up against my rulers, I'm going to have that exact border I want to match your cut paths. We can also do some other basic processing. For example, you may bring in the artwork and you may actually just need it at 90 degrees. So you can easily do your basic rotations and things like that in the software. So like I said, I've not actually done any drawing in here, but it's been really useful to proof the job and make sure that it's ready. Just for this example, I'm not going to cut this whole shape. I think the actual setting I must have been incorrect in the box maker, as it doesn't look like it should work like that. So let's just take this one part as an example, and then we'll create the job. And now we have the job on here. So hopefully that all has been a good introduction into that process. So now what I want to do is to move the actual laser head itself. And in this case, I don't actually need to use the red dot board because I'm working with a full sheet and we have that 2mm board thickness already set on. So in fact, we can go back to our software again. And within the software, because I've got that 2mm border, I can snap it straight to the top corner. And you can see, because I have that 2mm gap, even when I snap it up here, it means the job's now perfectly in the right place. The next thing to do is to select your material setting. So now we have a list search function. So we're going to search in here. And here we have our acrylic 6mm setting. So I can click on here, it applies the setting. And then from this point, if you click Q, it will just push it across to here and you'll stay on this page. Or if you click push to laser, it will now appear on your job across at this point here. So now everything is ready to go. We've applied the setting. You have a little preview here I find very useful. So the name of your setting and the actual setting itself, and everything is in the right place there, ready to go. So we can now switch back across to the actual machine side and we can have a look at working on the machine itself. So we'll go back to here. And again, if you have any questions throughout, please do ask away. If there are any other features you want to see later on, then of course we can cover those and go into more detail. So with this particular machine, it is the Run on Ruby version. So this means we have the tablet built into here. As you can see, we also have it set at the moment in the software to give us a estimated time for completion. We have the job on here. So if you had multiple jobs, you can easily go to a list view, select all the jobs you want or delete them out. And then with this series of machine, because it's all built into here, you can kind of do this as well with your standard system. It means that anyone on the same network in the business can now send a job to the machine. So that means anyone up in the office or in the design team, or if you just have your machine in more of a workshop environment, but you want to get all of your jobs ready away from the machine, you can actually queue them all up here, and then you can come out here, check what it says in terms of the material name here, have a look at the preview, and run the machine. So it just means you can do your design work away from the machine. You just have to be on the same network. And you could do this as well. You could do this kind of same style setup as well by just having a separate laptop dedicated to an old machine. So that is, if you don't have a laser with a dedicated touchscreen, you can still kind of use this same kind of workflow with the Ruby software very easily. So I'm just going to hit start on here, and then we'll just let the machine run away and get started on this job. So we have a little delay for the extraction startup, and then away it will go and it will start working. So looking at this setting that was already on here, I can see there's quite a bit of flash when the laser is actually cutting. Yeah. And to me, that means that there is a lot of excess power left. So you can see those bright sparks every time it cuts. So I'm just going to go straight into doing it. Well, it's good to know that the audio has dropped out again. Hopefully you can hear me again. Thought this was a hardware issue on the laptop, but actually it seems it might be with the headset itself. So hopefully you can hear me again now. Just watch the comments for a minute and I'll just post back in there. If somebody could just let me know if you could still hear again, then that would be good. Perfect. Okay, yeah. I'll have to have a look at it. So sorry. Back to the quick question on the focus tool itself. So with the focusing, you have the ultrasonic sensor or you have the little manual focus tool. But if you're talking within the Ruby software itself, then on here you'll have a settings tab, and then down here on the actual device itself you can set your lens here. So hopefully that answers your question about the different ways you might. But you only need to do this if you're working with a flex machine, so you're telling the machine the type of lens you have, whether it's for a CO2 or a fiber, or if you have a machine that has an ultrasonic sensor so that it makes the correct adjustment. If you're using the manual tool, then of course you wouldn't need to use this at all. Okay, so let's come back and we're going to look at our material settings. So you're going to click the three buttons here. We're going to go down to materials. And then here we have three little buttons in the top left corner. And we're going to add a new material. And we'll give the material name. Then we have our color options here. So by default, we have two processes. We have your cut and engrave. This is where you apply your setting. Generally, we want to process material as fast as possible. So when we're cutting, use 100% power. And then we'll vary the speed. I know roughly where the speed should be for this machine. And then we have our frequency here. You then have additional features under here, under your advanced tab, such as your passes, your correction and path planning. But this is more detailed to material parameters. If you'd like me to go to any information on any of these settings, then do ask away in the comments. But for now, I'll just focus on the power and the speed. And then again, you've got your engraving. So generally 100% speed for your engraving, and then just add the appropriate power. So we can take the same job. We have the laser head position, so I can snap the laser head up to here because I know this will be nicely on the material. I can come down to here to our list and search for our new material. So here we have it. And then again, we can push to the laser, which sends it straight to the queue. And there we go. We should have that ready to work. So if you are any material questions as well, then do ask away. Again, we go back to the touchscreen. I can then check the preview here and it has all of the details of the information on the material setting, so I know that I have the right material set. And then I can hit the play button on here again and away the system will go. So much faster cut, a lot less flashing on the actual cut itself as well. But I did still see a tiny bit of flashing, but that's just good because it makes me know, or lets me know that it has definitely cut all the way through. So we'll have a slightly less glossy edge, but I'm not getting any big marks on there. And of course, any risk of flaming is greatly reduced by using that correct combination of power and speed in there. So a nice, quick and easy way to make an adjustment. Just so that you're aware of another way to make little bits of fine tuning to your material settings. We'll come back to our laser software again. And on here, if we go back to the tab, you can also just click on this material details button. So say for example, I wanted to do one more fine tuning bit to the actual setting itself. I could again move my head to where I know it's good to cut, bring the job across. This time click on material details as I already have the actual base material created. And in here I could adjust the setting. But another thing you can do is you could actually have two different options within one material now within Ruby. So at the bottom here we have add effect to material. And you can see these are actually just names. Okay, so although it says engraved, dark, detail, these are just preset names that people commonly want to use, such as quality and speed. Obviously, the actual name means nothing. It's all about the actual setting that you have in there. That's really what counts. But for example, let's say we wanted a slower quality setting within here. Overall, hopefully I'm back again. Apologies for this hardware issue on the sound. Hopefully this is now back up and running as it should be. So what we were looking at there were just a few little changes to your material settings. So a quick, easy way to adjust your material settings from within here, rather than actually on the go back to your material database each time. You can just click on your materials here for the details and make your updates and changes here. So with all of that being said and processed, hopefully that's made things clear on your basics of how to go into your material settings. Like I say, if you have any questions on detailed material settings, do let me know. Okay, so just going to have a quick look. We have a question here about cut signs and the edge. Okay, let's have a look. We have to have cut signs to illuminate from one edge. Okay, very common application. This is for anyone who doesn't know, it'd be where you take something like a clear acrylic and then you would etch the material and then you would use some LEDs to obviously light the component. So the quality engraving sometimes has a rough recess. Be interested to know what you mean by the actual recess. Is this the actual edge itself, or is it something else? Is it just the far edge? So for example, let me just have a look at the two examples, or a couple of examples that I just cut. And I don't know if this is going to pick up on the camera, but let me see if I can hopefully show you. So we have two versions here, so we get the camera to focus. Here we go. So the very first cut we did was a lot slower, and as a result, let me see if we get it to pick up. It has then obviously clear. Doesn't give the best example, but you can see hopefully we have a pretty much a perfectly smooth flame polished edge here. Yeah. So that is just achieved by making sure that we're putting in enough heat. But the problem is, this is great if you need that super smooth edge, but what you can find is that you obviously run the risk of more chance of flaming when you cut something with a setting like this versus the slightly faster setting, which I guess on here, to be honest, looks pretty similar, but to me at least I can see there's a lot more kind of visible tiny slight ridges. But it also depends on your hardware as well. So in order to achieve your super glossy edge on your material, there are two things required. You need that right heat into the material, so your laser powered speed setting. You then just need to be obviously very wary of the actual setup to make sure it's safe for the material, so reduce that risk of flaming. So that'd be things like lifting the material up off the bed, usually something like a disposable or a sacrificial acrylic slat table, something like that would all aid those. But the other thing is your motion system. So depending on the model of laser you have, and the drive system will ultimately affect the quality as well. So obviously with these speedy systems, you have your servo drives, so nice smooth motion, and also the actual speed as well. Okay, so that hopefully covers the cutting side. And now we'll also then look at the engraving side of it. Okay, so let's do a little bit of clear acrylic engraving just so that I can show you some of the variation of the setting within Ruby and how you would adjust those. So this is a perfect example to use a bit of the Ruby software and how we can adjust these settings. So we'll go back across to our laser software again. Okay, so what we want is in here we have our design. So I'm just going to have a quick look to see what we have in here. Do we have anything I can work with? Yeah, I can work with one of these. I'm just going to click up here. You have Save as New. So if I click Save as New, it will essentially duplicate the job. That means the original is still there, not going to be affected. Let's take one of these bits of artwork. So we have the artwork itself. We're going to minimize down. Let's just check the size here. So we're at 95 millimeters for the actual whole part. And then we have our red and our blacks all set up correctly. Here we can give the job a new name. Now, something I like to do, if possible, especially with working on clear, is of course to take your artwork itself, and then over here we have the ability to flip the artwork. So this is so that we can view through the material, which kind of gives it a more nicer depth, and personally I think it's just a nicer finish. So again, we will move the laser head to where I want the job to start, take the job, snap it to here, and now let's have a little bit more detailed look at our engraving settings. So in here we have the black layer assigned to engrave, which is correct. We have our power and speed. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're using enough power to get some change on the material surface, so something for the LEDs to pick up, but that is it. So it's very common that people overpower and engrave too deeply into the material for edge light or edge lit applications, and that really stops the light from diffusing through the panel properly and doesn't really give you a good end result. So you want to only use enough power here. Depending on the quality, you then have your DPI or your lines, and on here again you need to make sure that you set something that is suitable for what you're doing. So if you're doing an extremely large panel, if you're doing a couple meter long, 5 meter or something, you might actually find going to a lower resolution is better, because generally these panels might be viewed from further away. And for those that don't know, this is the number of lines essentially the machine will do in the y-axis, so as the arm goes back to front. So for example, going from 500 to 250 will make the job also 2 times as fast to engrave as well. So again, really useful. Then the other setting under here, again, depending on the type of laser you have, not so much needed on this one, is you have the type of pattern. So again, we can very easily automate dot patterns in here by using the ordered pattern function and using a grayscale graphic. Again, that's widely used for edge-lit acrylic and plastics. And then you have these other methods which are more useful when we do photo engraving and things like that. Sometimes you just want a block engraving where you'd have none set, but this is all activated by the grayscale of the artwork. So if your artwork is black, then this is kind of, these settings don't come into play. But as soon as you start to apply the grayscale, then this effect onto the engraving starts to take account. And there are other things in here, such as your high quality as well. But it tends to be getting this power correct. So generally, if you have too much power, that is when you start to have issues. So got our material here, and then we'll push that to the laser. And let's just give this a go and get this working. So just looking at the way this material is engraving, this might actually be a extruded sheet, so you can sometimes tell by the way the surface finish comes across. But generally I find I just need 2 settings. So kind of a high quality setting, and that would be just a little bit slower if you have really detailed imagery and shapes. And then I just have kind of like a throughput setting as well. And again, you can color map all of these into one job. So it's really easy to do all of that. Do any other material questions at all, just while we're looking at the material side? Okay, so we'll just let that job get across and finish off. So just while that's finishing off processing, let's come back to our software and let's have a little look at some of the other processing features, which of course are very useful in this software. So on your prepare screen here, there's a couple of features which sometimes can be overlooked, which are really useful. So we have our overlapping cut lines function. So this is great, especially if you're working with artwork that's been sent to you. Maybe it's hard always to see whether there are overlapping lines in the job. So you've got your overlapping lines function here, and you can either have it just do straight lines or all lines. I tend to have it default, so it will skip all overlapping lines. The other feature which is quite useful to be able to turn on and off is your inner geometry first. So if you're using some external software package or other type of nesting and cut ordering function, then you would want to leave this deactivated, but otherwise generally I would leave this turned on. So this just makes sure that it cuts your outer profiles at the very end of it. But these are two functions which are just very useful to use, and I'll just give a quick example of that now. So let's just have a look at another type of software. So here we have CorelDRAW, and I'll just switch across to that. So let's have a quick look at bringing in some software other than ours, just to show the workflow from there. Okay, so hopefully you can see CorelDRAW. So this would be the same for Adobe Illustrator or any other type of graphics package. But just to quickly show the workflow. So of course, previously we might have to use things like setting the correct line thickness on our old software, whereas now it doesn't matter anymore. So it doesn't matter if you want to use a slightly wider line to make it visually easier to see your drawing. And again, if you want to do some simple nested shapes, obviously it's just a manual method at the moment. But say we had a couple of shapes we needed to process, then we can just quickly take these and snap these up like here. We can take the job and then we can publish this to a PDF. And you'll notice that, of course, purposely left it so that these lines are overlapping here. So this is a very simple job here. You could easily manually delete this, but if you start to do something a lot more complex, then suddenly this isn't so easy at all anymore. So let's go back across to our laser software. And we can go to our first tab. We can import from here. We can go to the next stage automatically by clicking on the job. Select these because we want there to be cut lines, set them to red, hit create job. Move the laser head to the position where I want the cut line to start. Bring the job across. And here we're now going to make sure to activate our overlapping cut lines function. So this means now when we start this process here, we've not had to go through and adjust all of the artwork. You can see it's automatically drawing those two top lines together and then just does that single cut straight up the center. So very efficient, whereas before you might need to put more gaps in between your cut shapes in order to try and make it easy to set up multiple parts. We can now very easily and efficiently do that. It's always hard to see these things on camera, but we have our engraved acrylic here, but there's really no depth to this engrave at all. So we've got this contrast, but there's really no depth at all. And that stops also any of that extra material that could deposit into the surface that can be quite hard to clean off as well. So we're just engraving enough to get this contrast and this very slight depth that an LED would then start to pick up. So it's kind of hard that we can kind of use the lights built into the machine. But you can see obviously there's enough there to obviously easily pick up the lighting. So we have our two cut profiles, very quickly and easily cut. And like I say, a very efficient use of material now. So let's say you've got a job and you really need to do more duplication. Then again, let's go back to our laser software. And here in our laser software, let's say for example you had our job from before, So for example, if you are running designs and jobs that you previously used, we then need to, maybe it's a good time for us to look at file management within Ruby. So designs is artwork only. So these are just our drawn shapes, okay? So if I click on one of these, it just takes us to the design tab here. However, if you go to your jobs tab, then we find a job. So for example, this one here, and I now click on it, it takes us all the way to our prepare side. So in your actual job side, it has the job in the correct position on the bed. It has your material parameter. So if you have repeat work and repeat business, you can very quickly just go to this tab, go to jobs, find the job you want, and then all you have to do now is push it to laser and it's there ready to go in your queue. So any repeat work, any repeat products, this is the best way to work with it. We can then go another step in terms of the actual management of these. So for example, we go to a job here, and then you have the ability here to add a tag. So this is a really useful way to add traceability to your job. So that could be your own interior serial number, or however way you want to track it. It could be a product name. And then with this method, it means that if you then had a work order or another way to monitor your jobs, rather than having to go through here, you can hit search up here, and then you can start to search, and you can see it's automatically picking up over here this tag that we've got. And again, you could have preset tags in here as well. And it just means it's an easier way to manage the view of those jobs. And again, you can see we have users as well. So if you have different users using the machine, you can again use this as a way to keep track. So that's just a little bit there on ways to manage your workflow of your jobs. But let's take our previous job. Let's say we want to make more of these. So what you're going to do is position where your first job should be. And you'll see when we select a job, you get this little grid box here. So if I click on this, I now have the ability to add a quantity. So I can either click on the boxes here, or I can type in numbers up here. We then have the ability to add our spacing. And then you have the ability to add offsets as well. So you could do something like that. And if you have something like an offset here, then that means you can then start to reduce that vertical spacing. You can see we start to really get some good material utilization from our sheet of material there. I can click update. And then, for example, if you want to know the full runtime before you run a larger engraving job like this, you would have your calculate job time. And then once that's run through the process, of course, you have to have the right material setting here. You can see it adds it to the right-hand side of your job. So if you've run a job previously, automatically update and store this data here, so you know how long it would take if you need to run it again. Or using this method again, you can see we have the time for the engraving in here as well. Okay, I'm just going to quickly check to see, do we have any other Ruby questions at this stage? Any other features you'd like me to have a look into? Any questions about what I showed you so far? And just while we do that, I'm just going to set up one other little test thing just to show you another way we can work with our software in terms of the management, which is a nice easy way to track your jobs. So looks like we have no other questions at this stage, so I'm going to go into a little bit more, one other method at least of doing some tracking for your jobs. So if we come across to our software, it's just going to be another step on using our tag functionality here for monitoring a job. So for example, let's say we have a design, again, like I say, normally you bring this in from your design software. So we click New Design. I'm going to set this to match, for example, the products that you may want to use. So this will just give you a little bit more of an insight into some of the basic functionality of our drawing software. So we've set the page size to match product, and then we do have the ability to do some basic artwork tests into here. So it's just a simple bit of text. So you snap that up to there. So for black for engraving, you could change something like a font or something like this as well. So let's just see. Like that. Okay, and then we have the actual design itself. So we're going to call this the chopping board test, as we'll use this as a chopping board example. So here we have a job. The artwork page is set to match the product size. So it means that if you were to put your product to the top left-hand corner, the artwork would be positioned in the correct place. You would then apply your material onto here. And then we would save this. Okay. So say this is a repeat product that, again, we might engrave or work with. Maybe it's a customer that always orders the same thing. You can get it to this stage, and then we could start to actually use something like a product barcode to check this. So we would come to this function here. And then what I can do is, if I go across to here, I'm just going to take the actual product itself. So here, for this example, for this little demo, I'm just going to take your standard chopping board, and it's obviously got an ID, but of course this could be your own internally generated barcode or matrix. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to take, again, a standard little scan gun. We'll then go to our software, and then back here in the tags, we can then scan the barcode. We can add that onto there. Okay, so now we have our barcode all stored on here. We can save this. So this means the next time we come to work with this particular product, we can simply take the product itself. So we're going to take our product. We can then ask the operator to go to your jobs tab. We can click on the search function here. And then because we've added this tag, I can now scan it. You can see actually I've got one here which I set up previously. And then we have the job here. So we can then select that. It's a super nice, easy way to load job. You also not having to worry about operators accidentally typing in the wrong data. And also, some of these codes that we use within businesses to store things like product jobs or product IDs don't always tend to be the most easy to remember names, numbers, and things like that. So using something like QR code or barcode scanners and this function makes it really nice and simple to set up a job on there. Okay, let's go have a quick look see where we are with questions. Okay, so a quick question about file case use types. So I would say what you'll generally find is, where possible, I would use a PDF, but we do find PDF support sometimes is less supported in some CAD packages, in which case then you'll either be potentially forced down the route of using something like a DXF file, which is fine. You just need to check the scaling of the file when you bring it in. It's very easy to check. Or generally, I would also look at an SVG or an EPS as well for some of these CAD packages. Depending on how old the software is the customer's using, sometimes the spline data, so the information for curves coming from a DXF always isn't the cleanest. So rather than being a nice smooth Bezier curve, it would be like a really jagged edge, and that results then in a poorer cut quality. So where possible, stick with PDF. If you can't use PDF, I then go to SVG because that tends to be very stable. And if that doesn't work, then I'll look at EPS, DXF, or one of those other file formats. You just have to be a little bit more cautious about checking the file before you run it. Okay, so let's cover some more of the features which are specific to the Ruby software. Really, it's kind of designed around trying to improve your workflow when you've got multiple jobs and setups. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up the chopping board job again. Okay, so let's pretend that we have a job where the chopping board is going to sit in the jig. This jig is, for example, we've cut a material like a bit of wood, and we're going to take the chopping board and we're going to place it into a jig. Okay, and what we want is we want it so that every time we bring our artwork in, it's going to bring that artwork in and it's going to snap it exactly to the right position in our jig with, you know, the minimal amount of work that we need to do manually as possible. So hopefully that makes sense. We have a jig and we want to get the job straight to the jig in the right position with our right material setting and everything else. So the first thing is we would have to manually set a job up. Okay, so we would put our jig into the bed of the machine, put the lathe head in the right position, snap the artwork so it's exactly in the right position, and then we need to take a note of this XY position here. So this is giving us this top left corner of the artwork. So 60 by 45. We need to remember that. So we then go to our profile setting here. And by showing you this process, hopefully it's giving you an understanding about what profiles can do. So profiles is the ability to add in automation to job importing, essentially. So removing as many of the manual steps as possible. So we're going to add a new profile. We'll just call it chopping board 2. And the next thing we need to do is to tell it what material to use. So every time we bring in a job for the chopping board, we want it to be set to bamboo. So let's have a look. Then we come down to the next section and we will need to put in our settings. So this is where we looked at that position setting here. So we go back to here. We are looking at 60 by 45. Let's say for this example. So we're going to select this one. We're going to want that to be 60. This to be 45. So that means every time the artwork is going to be brought in, it's going to be positioned. So this is always from that top left anchor point here. We then have, where do we want the job to end up? So do we want it as first step as a design? Do we want it to be as a job? Or do we actually want it to go straight to the queue? So generally where possible, if we have a jig, we have everything set up, we have the same workflow, we don't need any manual processing in here. We can have it go straight to the queue. And then we have some basic things, so your overlapping cut lines in the geometry first, this kind of stuff here. So this is all set up and it's saved. So now what does our workflow look like for using the profile? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to switch back to our CorelDRAW software. Okay. So within our CorelDRAW software, what we now need to do is we're going to set up our workspace. So for example, we're going to set up this page size to again match like we had previously, the actual job size that we had for the chopping board. So that was 310 by 150. So again, this is obviously I'm doing manually, but you'd have obviously all set up as templates. You would then have some customer artwork. As you can tell, I've been working with lasers a long time and I've lost all creativity whatsoever. And now what we need to do is send this whole job across. So again, I'm going to use the PDF format. This time I need to make sure it sends that whole page because I want that white space in there as well. Okay, so now we have our job ready to go. So we can come back to our Ruby software. So I'm going to manually show this for a second. So on here, we're going to click import. We're going to import the file. And now we want to get it from here straight to the queue. So we can go to our profiles function here. We can take the job and I can just drag it straight onto my profile. And now if we go to the queue, the job is here and it is in the correct place. So it knows that anchor point. It's applied the bamboo setting. So the operator has not had to use any of these functions. And we also actually have a hot folder mapping option for this profiles as well. So you can see here we have the manage mappings. At the moment it's not activated. But essentially when you activate this, you can now link a profile to a folder on your computer. And that would allow you then to automate this workflow even more. So for example, you might have some kind of order management system. You could click a button, send the PDF straight to a folder. That's then linked to this profile. And then the job is now here on your actual queue itself. So that means that the operator would then walk across to here. And what that means is we now have customers where the operator doesn't even actually have to use a computer at all. They can go to their order management software interface, they can scan a job or hit load, and kind of the rest of the work is undertaken in the background. They just come across to here, see the job in the queue, load the product, focus it, and the job is ready to go. So it's a really nice way if you have repeat work or repeat style jobs to quickly and efficiently improve your workflow rather than have to do these kind of manual repetitive tasks. Okay, so let's just go back to our software again. And again, any other questions at all, please do ask away so I can make sure to make this as tailored as possible. So we'll just clear this job. Now I'm just going to see if we have quickly in here this function. Okay, we have this set up. Okay, let's have a quick look. Okay, so we don't have any other questions at this point, so we're going to move on to another topic, which can be data plate coding. So anything where we're using variable data essentially. So you're making a product, tends to be things like say like data plaques, can be things you can use this for things like chopping boards. So you need to do 30 at once, you've got a list of names to work with, then we can do that now all natively within our software itself. So you'll see on this top tab here, we have designs, which I said is artwork only. We have your jobs, which is your jobs when they're set up and they have their position and your material setting. But then we have something here called data sources. So this is where we can upload a CSV file. Here we get a preview of it, so we've got some names. And we can use this to now power the machine to create artwork. So what you would have is you'd have your default template set up. For example, we'll see if we continue on with this, we'll save a new copy. And what we're going to do is, rather than having a static bit of text here, we have the ability to add dynamic data. Here we can now link this to the file. And we now no longer, you can use this for like alignment, maybe your original artwork. But what's going to come in is this new dynamic text here instead, okay? So you see what we have is this big box, but we're going to size this to where we want the text to go. So I only want the text to go in this region here. So I'm going to shrink that down to match. We then have the ability obviously to change the font and the ability to change how we want the artwork to be. So do we want it to fit the shape, do we want it to stretch, or do we want it to try and make it actually meet a certain font size in here as well? These are all different options. But the main thing is, by having this border, it means your artwork is never going to be too big. It's always going to fit in the area that you need it to be marked. So if this completes, we can save this, we can create the job. But of course, now we want this to be for multiple chopping boards with that data from that file up once. So the first thing is, we'll set it up like before. So we're going to set up the amount of chopping boards we want to do. So here we're going to do 3 by 3. Let's pretend we had a jig with 25mm spacing. And now you can see, as well as having the ability to control the duplication, we can also check that it's linked with our file here. So I can see it's linked with the correct file. That's fine. And the first bit of data is on the right column. So now, with all of this set up, and we click push to laser, you'll see it's automatically picked up all of those names. So of course, if you had a data plate, you could have many different lines of data in there, or if you do things like this, like a chopping board, you could have a static graphic and then just your name updating. But you can see it's all set up, ready to go. And you can see it also has automatically generated 2 pages as well. So it's automatically seen that we can't fit all of the names on one laser bed with the way we have it set up. So once it's done 1 page, it will then automatically move on to page 2. And that way you can work through all of your artwork. So I hope you can kind of get an idea of how that can obviously be extremely useful depending on your use case for the machine. Okay, so hopefully that's answered any question there. So have we got any other questions at all? Anything else that you feel you may be missing, or anything else like that? Just see the message. We've got a question here about data sources not used. The only thing I can think of is that you talk about whether it's activated. So sometimes in your software, some of these features here won't always be activated by default. So in your settings tab, under features, we still have some of these features set as kind of test and beta functions. So essentially what that means is we are looking to keep updating and improving them, and there's going to be changes made to them in their workflow. So it's kind of, it is in a usable state. It is stable if it's been released, but we will continue to see development and changes on it. And I know in our next release, we have some even better functionality coming soon to do with using your data sources and QR codes and barcodes. So I know that's something that's going to be looked at with our next update to your software. Okay, let's just go back to here. It's going to have a quick look at questions again. Okay, so we cut more than we engrave. Look at Q series for cutting thicker material. Okay, so if we talk just quickly then about your machine selection for material, of course, so I'm sure you can appreciate it. Very special application, but I'm just going to pretend that we are cutting a completely normal standard material, and there's nothing abnormal about the processing or quality-wise for it. Okay, so with your laser, there are certain things that affect the cutting quality and what you want to use the machine for. So we have here the Speedy series. So I'm going to quickly cover the Speedy series and Q series, just give you a quick overview of what the differences are. So we have your laser arm, your laser head. So all of this I would consider, and your belts and your drive is the electronics, the control system. So that will affect your performance, so how quickly and how accurately can the head move around your shape. So between both machines, we're both using, with your Q series, you'd be looking at a servo system just like this. So they're both very high quality motion systems. This machine has a little bit more refinement and fine tuning in terms of the design of things like the laser head in the arm, which means that it can move around complex shapes a bit more quickly and a bit faster. But if you're cutting really thick material, then sometimes that's not always the most critical thing. And of course, this affects mainly engraving the most as well. So if you're doing slow cuts, then you're going to be looking at things like the actual power that you have within the laser. So with our Speedy series, they all come with the ceramical technology. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the quality of the laser that comes across into here, into your cutting head and down, is very high quality. Now, it's obviously like a direct comparison, but you can kind of think of this as comparing an LED bulb to an old halogen bulb. Yes, they both produce light, but one is less efficient than the other, and it's the same. So 120 watts of ceramic laser power is different to 120 watts of glass laser power, which could be an option on something like the Q series machine. However, if you're just doing your cutting, you're just doing your basic fixed shapes, the Q series really is good because you've got that. Still got our own hardware in terms of the control and electronics. You still got a servo system, but you just never quite get the cut quality that you would get from this machine. But you do have all of the ability with the power capability in there. So it's moving towards the Speedy. It will cut your thick material very nicely, but it's never going to be able to do things like the really nice high-speed detailed engraving or anything like that with a glass type laser source. So it's a little bit more limited in the complete functionality of what it can do. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an overview about some of the things to think about when looking at your laser systems. But yeah, Q series is a great machine. So to speak, it's just understanding exactly what you want to get from it. Okay, so I think I'm going to finish off with one final look at the features if we don't have any other questions at all. I'm just going to have a little bit, just because people always tend to ask and like to know. I'm just going to look a little bit at photo engraving. So I'm just going to quickly grab a picture. Just to explain a little bit about what we can do with photos and the kind of things to look at. Okay, so we'll go back to our main page here, and let's just see if I can find downloads here. Just downloaded a JPEG. So by default, it's a color image, but we take the JPEG, we drag it into our software, and it's automatically converted to your grayscale preview, just because this gives us a better understanding of the engraving. And we'll just make this a little bit, it's not too bad, keep that for now. So things to consider with laser engraving detailed imagery is that unfortunately we could maybe create the effect of color with manual post-processing, things like using inks and things like that into your material, but ultimately you've got to think of the laser as more of like a black and white process onto your material. And with that in mind, it's always beneficial to look at the image like this in the grayscale, but also then to consider that anywhere where you have shadows, where you have not good contrast between areas, you will not see detail, which is why, unfortunately, you would look to charge customers, or you should charge customers for a lot of post-processing on imagery before you even bring them into the machine, just because the difference between the lights and the grays, if you have a poorly lit photo, it's not going to be very good. So those are the things to look out for. So for example, I would expect to see really difference between these two shapes here when they're engraved, it's just going to look like one big blob, just because we don't have that color differentiation. But a few nice things in here with Ruby is we now have the ability to do some basic gradient effects. So this means we can try and manually start to increase contrast. So this is already quite dark here. So what I'm doing here is, this is the darks, this is the highs. So I'm just essentially manually increasing the contrast. So just pushing these up, so you can see compared to before, we didn't have a huge amount of contrast, whereas now I'm actively pushing the contrast up. This will obviously be at the slight cost of a loss of some of the detail here in the shadows. So maybe I'll bring that up a bit. But it's all about contrast with laser engraving, just because we need that good differentiation. So let's see, we'll push these highs up a little bit more. But it's a nice little tool within our software here. We can then apply this. And the next thing is to consider what visually looks good here is not irrelevant, but it's really, you've got to think about your image with lasering in mind. But it's a nice little function here. You might need to, for example, invert this, depending on what effect you're trying to create. And again, you got your basic resizing. Okay, create the job. Stick the acrylic setting back onto here. And then I'm just going to bump this setting up so I get a little bit of coverage of the material settings. Come into here. Just put a little bit more power into it. And another thing just to note is, just a common thing I see, is people tend to also always increase the resolution here if they need a more detailed engraving, but it doesn't actually always work like that, just because what it means is that your laser is overlapping a lot. So if you go to 1000 and you don't have the right lens or the right type of laser technology, then your laser is overlapping a lot and you're actually losing definition because it's kind of firing twice in the same place to get the same effect, which is why, for example, you'll find often if you're doing detailed imagery in wood, it's better actually at 333 versus 500. But anyway, let's just put this up a little bit. Now we'll just push this, do the timer. We'll just use this as our little job to run while we look at any final questions or any other questions and other features while this is running away. So we'll get rid of that one. Sorry, I've actually had, well, the good news is I can leave this running and now recap exactly what I just did, as I had it on the wrong camera. Sorry, I didn't have the screen share there. Well, hopefully the actual visual will live up to what you just heard. So let's have a quick look at this again. So we're going to go to the tab here. We're going to bring in the photo. So it's in our downloads. So within the software here, you can see the photo. It's obviously in your black and white, ready for the preview. And it's this little button here that allows us to then look at adjusting it. So this is your dark sides over here, and this is your lights up here. And here we can manually start to punch and adjust and create extra contrast within the artwork to give the laser a better chance of getting a good result. So you can see here, we're really just trying to create this definition between the darks and the lights. And yes, this may not look brilliant this way as a visual, but we need this contrast for the laser to be able to properly get a good result when engraving onto the material. So if you don't have that contrast, it's all going to just look like one big blocky shape. So if there are any other questions at all, please do ask away. Just having a quick look through here to see if there's anything else on the feature wise that could be a nice thing to introduce. We'll need to add a quick cut line to this afterwards. Set the margin back to 0. But here we have the job that's currently running. This is the one that's inverted. So I'm just going to add a cut line to this one, as the job is already in the right place. And then as for the next one, I just actually want to cut this out. I'm going to take the black layer here, I'm going to undersign it, and we're just then going to have just our cut. And then you can see I can't push it to the laser because the laser is already running on a job, but I can queue this job up. So it's now waiting, ready to process once this other job is finished. So you can see we can do all of this while the machine's running as well. So it looks like it's getting near the end of the job. And then we have it set so it automatically remove the job from the queue when it's finished. You can turn that feature on or off. So we're now left with just a cut job. So I can turn that on. Perfect. So just get rid of some of the dust off of here. So this was processed on the ordered dithering method. And we need to get something contrasting to hold against this in a minute. So I'm just going to show you a real close-up stuff just so you can understand what ordered dithering is. You should be able to find, if you search Trotec photo processing, you should be able to find more detailed information on the processing modes. But here it's created automatically a dot pattern based on the grey within the actual image itself. So this is the effect that changes when you adjust from like order dithering to some of the other types of line pattern. But again, obviously it's automatically reversed. And then again, this is something where you could take the artwork and of course you could do your edge lighting. Obviously in this case, we would need a contrasting backing color on here as well. So you'd want that dark backing on there. A little bit difficult to see the detail in the clouds and things in there. But hopefully that gives you an idea about that basic workflow. So hopefully you can see there is more detail in there. But again, it's a bit of more of an art form with photo engraving. So I'm just going to open up for one more set of questions. Otherwise we will finish today's session there. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes. Any other questions at all on anything to do with laser? Okay, so last few questions. Let's see what we have. Okay, so the first question is about engraving steel, and the answer is yes, but there are obviously, like everything, there's always a few caveats. So I'm just going to quickly talk about metal marking in general and how that relates to steel. So quite often, a common process is to mark coated steel. So this is where you'll have some kind of paint or other type of finish applied to a steel itself, in which case you would use generally a CO2 laser. And the reason you would use that is because it will remove all of your coating and bring you back down to the metal. So that's how you often see a lot of these things like the tumblers and other cups and things like that. All these drink bottles, they all tend to be marked with a CO2 laser and they have your stainless steel or steel underneath. If you want to mark the bare steel, then again, if you have a CO2 laser already, or that's what you need to use, then you could buy a marking compound called Cermark. Relatively expensive depending on the batch, the quantity you do, but you apply it to the material. It's heated up by a CO2 laser, creates a chemical reaction, which will give you a very black, dark mark. And the final option is if you don't have a laser at all, or if you're willing to add a different laser to your capabilities, then you could get one of our small little desktop fiber laser units. And with that, you can mark directly onto the steel. So you can go straight into it, you can polish it, you can make the steel go white. You could just do a simple black engraving into it, do your data tags, all of that kind of thing. We've had applications as well for doing actual, creating stamps, so really deep engraving into steel. But it just depends what you already have access to. But yeah, you can mark it, and there are different options for there. Next question we have is about dithering for photos. Generally, I would, if we have a quick look, auto dithering is good if you're doing something far away, but it looks a bit kind of patchy, doesn't look very photo-like. But it's great if you need to get extra contrast. So if you're doing something really big on a wall, then ordered can be good. But I tend to use it really if the image quality is not that great. Generally, I would go to your settings here. And then I would use probably this one here. So this Stucky setting, or however you pronounce it. But either of them, they all kind of just give different variations. I just generally wouldn't use ordered dithering. One of these three tends to give a better pattern just because it's randomized, so it creates a more natural effect. And final question is, would you use a fluid to clean the plastic engraving? Yes, generally I think you will need to use something. So you will find there are just acrylic cleaners on the marketplace, but you have to be, it's almost what you use to apply the cleaning agent is more important quite often. So by that I mean, especially on something like clear acrylic, you'll find you can often very easily scratch it, especially if you're looking at edge lit applications. It's something really you have to really carefully balance. So you need to use something really soft cloth, even something like the lens cleaning cloths could be useful, and then an actual dedicated acrylic cleaner is something that's good to use. Okay, so it looks like we haven't got any other questions, in which case have a great rest of your day. Thank you for putting up with the technical difficulties that we always seem to come across. And any other questions, just email in to one of our contacts and we can obviously give you some information if you have any other questions on the software. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.